Hi, and welcome to the Uplift with Dabney Brice, the podcast where we'll elevate global stories by shining a spotlight on underrepresented narratives, educating ourselves about current and historical events and diverse cultures and communities. Let's journey together to step outside our comfort zones, uplift each other, and make the world a little bit better along the way. Welcome, my uplifters. It's your girl, Dabney Brice. And on today's episode, we have my good friend, Keith Runes. He's going to come and share his story. He's Filipino, but he was raised in United Arab Emirates and went to college and currently works in the US. We talk about a lot of things, such as him growing up with a lot of diverse people and cultures. We talk about his family and Filipino culture. We talk about his passion for music and so much more. Overall, it's a well-rounded, really good episode, and I hope y'all enjoy it. So let's dive in and let's get started. Keith, I'm so excited that you're here.
Oh, thank you.
You were one of the people that when I was thinking of people to bring on to the podcast, I was like, you know what? Let me bring on my friend Keith. I feel like, just for a little background for those that are listening, like we know each other from Lehigh. I was trying to count how many years, because we met freshman year and that was
Yes.
in 2014 and it's 2021. And I don't know the math. You're the engineer. I don't know.
If you add 6, you get 2020, and then add another one, so it's 7 years. There
Which
you
is
go.
like wild, because I feel like with all of like our friend group, it still feels so new.
Yeah, it really does.
Like, oh, I know you, but like there's still so much to learn. So yeah, I think that's really cool. We've known each other for 7 years, and I'm really excited to be able to tell your story. And again, thanks for coming on.
Of course, I feel very honored to be a part of the podcast. When I first heard that you were doing this, I was like, oh man, like one of my friends is doing a podcast, and that's just really exciting to me because not a lot of people like have the time and or like have like the energy like I know Dabney does, like, you know, to do this sort of thing. And it's just, you tackle a great variety of topics, and you know, and just the cast of people that you bring on is just really exciting. So yeah, I'm very honored to be here.
Thanks. I appreciate it. Also, Keith and I were in the same a cappella group, and that was fun. And he arranged my senior solo, and that was a great time.
It was a great time. It was indeed a great time.
So we're going to talk about music later on because Keith is very talented, but that's another fun fact about him before you really get to know him. But speaking of you, Keith, if you could just introduce yourself and just tell the audience who you are and your background.
Sure. To the audience, hello. My name is Keith Runes. I am 24 years old. I'm Filipino by descent, and I currently live in Philadelphia with my wife, Dana. Shout out to her. We got married in the beginning of 2021 during the pandemic, so that's just been really interesting. And get into that later maybe. As far as where I grew up in Dubai. I was born in the capital of United Arab Emirates, which is Abu Dhabi, but then moved to Dubai, and was pretty much grew up there and was raised there all the way up until college. I came to the United States, came to Lehigh, met Dabney there, and I studied bioengineering there and have worked in the biopharmaceutical industry since graduating. And since then, found some work in Philly, moved there. And yeah, that's part of my life. Another big part of my life is that I love music. I love learning everything, like from theory to performing music as a musician, and also understanding like, you know, like why music impacts culture the way it does, especially within like a Western context, since that's like kind of what I like grew up with and what I studied. In general, I love music a lot, and yeah, that's me simplified in a simplified nutshell, I guess.
Yeah, that was good. That was a good intro. Good job.
Thank you.
So you mentioned before, like you are Filipino by descent. Your family is from the Philippines, but like you grew up in Dubai, moved to the US. So like, can you take us through like how, like what that journey was like? How did you, I guess, get to the US? How did you get to the Dubai and all that?
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's a loaded question because if you take a really just a look at anyone, like you really won't like what you really only like are going for is pretty much like what they look like. And like that kind of covers up like a lot of, you know, of the story that like lies underneath. So like I found like whenever people ask me, it's like, oh, like where are you from? They're expecting I make the joke sometimes and I'll say like, oh, I'm from New Jersey. We're from California.
Mm-hmm.
Just because like, I'm Filipino, a lot of Filipinos live in Jersey and or California. So like maybe I'm from there. Um, but yeah, that's not the case,
Mm-hmm.
fortunately. So my parents were born and met in the Philippines. They came to United Arab Emirates. Basically, my dad moved to the UAE for basically to work further into the aviation industry, and that's what he currently did before the pandemic. Um, and they had three kids before me, so I'm the youngest of four children. So I was born in again Abu Dhabi, the capital, and moved to Dubai when I was 5 years old. So um, I wasn't born in the Philippines, but I did grow up basically in another country outside of like where I was descended from. Um, in Dubai, I attended an international school, and it was the same school I went to from all the way from kindergarten all the way to high school. So it was the same school. There were a lot of people, a lot of friends that I made that were basically stuck with the whole way through as well. So, and they were like a diverse cast of characters, really. Um, like I had a lot of friends from like South Asia, so from Pakistan and India, and like a few from like the Middle Eastern region as well. And like also just a very tiny amount of people that were like from like the UK or like from the US. But it was basically I would describe like my school as like this like melting pot of different cultures and backgrounds that kind of like I would definitely say they formed me the way I am today. Um, my siblings made it like used to joke with me when I was growing up around like when I was like 12 to 14, maybe earlier. I would say, Keith, you have like an Indian, Pakistani, like Egyptian accent all in one. And I had no idea what they were talking about. Like it just sounded like me. Like I wasn't trying to like, put on an accent. I was trying to make fun. I wasn't like trying to imitate anyone. But like and I guess I eventually grew out of it because no one is telling me that these days, or at least they
Yeah,
wouldn't know.
I wouldn't know.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, them telling me that was like a basically evidence of just the friends I made and friends I made in school, and like where they're coming from, and like who influenced like the I guess the way I spoke. Um, it was also interesting because in school I also all my English teachers were all from Ireland. So
Hmm.
you would have thought that like I would have developed an Irish accent, but no, I don't. Again, it's a mystery to me why I sound the way I do.
Hmm.
But anyways, yeah. So I attended an international school. All the students were pretty much from all over the world. You can name a country and they'd probably be there. But yeah, was there until high school. When it's time to pick out colleges, there were actually a few options that the high school curriculum actually supported. So I could have picked out colleges in the UK, to Canada, even like some local colleges within the Middle East. Um, However, the most popular choice were definitely like U.S. colleges and institutions. Even from like a young age, I was always told that like like, oh, US colleges are the best. You want to get into Harvard, you want to get into like
Hmm.
Yale, Ivy League schools, always represented in, the stuff I was watching and like the stuff I heard.
Hmm.
It was definitely like what I grew up with was basically like all pretty much just Western stuff. And not to a fault, but like, that's just the way it was.
Hmm.
Um, Also, my three older siblings also attended college in the US. So it kind of made sense for me to do the same. Like if I went to the US, I'd be closer to family. Um, like I've been to the US multiple times when I was a kid, so like I kind of knew like how life worked there, and like I was familiar with like living in the US sort of.
Hmm.
I had an idea from what I watched on TV, I guess. Um, so yeah, so I applied to a few different schools. One of them was Lehigh. They were actually so let me back that up. So I applied to US colleges, but at the same time, I was an international student. And a lot of international students do require financial, like a good amount of financial aid in order to attend U.S. schools, because as it is, the education system in the U.S. just kind of requires that, oh, you're coming here, and we assume that you're going to be, joining the U.S. workforce because of it. So, and part of it, and so they can use that they can kind of leverage it to say, well, this is what we're going to charge for, like, the education that we offer. And it's pretty high. Like, if you definitely compare it to, like, you've probably seen stories of, like, the comparisons between, like, Scandinavian countries and between the, like, they're literally free.
Yeah.
From
I mean,
what's
even
average.
just Canada, like, it's upstairs and it's just like,
It's upstairs, and it's, yeah, and like you're still within the same, like, you're in the Americas, and what you're getting is essentially like definitely like a fraction of like what US colleges are charging. So
mhm.
um so with that in mind, like, I applied to schools that would offer financial aid to international students like me. I got into maybe like two or three schools out of maybe 10 or 11. And Lehigh was one of them. And the reason why I chose them is because they offered like the best financial aid.
Same.
And it wasn't like, it was no question to my parents, who are all obviously making the ultimate decision of
hmm
where I was going. And this also happened to my brother too. He actually got into Cornell. He ended up going to Tufts in Massachusetts, but Cornell was kind of for him his dream school. It was his first choice in a lot of ways, and they were the first school to get back to him and told him he got the offer. They accepted him, and he was really happy. Um, and they gave him like some financial aid, but then Tufts came like a few weeks later. Like, he was already boarded up, like he was already like geared up to go. He got like the summer readings, and like all like the different pamphlets that have all the information. And then a few weeks later, Tufts comes back and says, "Oh, we accepted you too, and here's like a better financial aid package."
Mm.
And like, I just remember like that summer, he was just seeing him so distraught. And like, he definitely cried a few times, like, to our parents, like saying like, like, this is what I want to do. Like, Cornell is just like, just really good. But like, in the end of the day, like, when it came down to it, like, the financial aid made a really big difference to, like, my parents, and, supporting, two younger siblings as well as himself while he was still in college. So, as an international student, you don't really, there's a lot to do when you can dream. You can definitely dream, and you can
Mhm.
definitely work hard. Um, but at the end of the day, I mean, once you've like, submitted all your information to these colleges and institutions, like, there's not really much you can do until like they come back and just give you some sort of an offer, and you take it or you don't. Like, you could be really gifted, and maybe they see that, but like, to a lot of, to most international students that work hard, um, that's what it is. But I'm not trying to knock Lehigh here. Lehigh's a great school, and I'm so thankful for, like, the opportunities that I was given there.
hmm
Um, so yeah, applied schools, got into Lehigh. That's where I studied bioengineering for 4 years. Met a lot of my closest friends there, including Dabney. And it's also where I met my wife, Dana, my now wife, Dana. Um, yeah, so after graduating, entered the pharmaceutical industries, um, worked for a company, you may have heard of them, Sanofi Pasteur, one of the biggest vaccine manufacturers,
hmm
and then eventually came to Philly to work for a mid-sized pharmaceutical company. Yeah, I moved here back in 2019. My wife and I got married in the beginning of 2021, and that's where we've been living and loving ever since.
Nice, nice. And there's a couple of things that you mentioned that I was like, oh wow, like, so the way that you were telling that, I was like, Keith is a true definition of like a global citizen.
Mm.
Like, I aspire to be a global citizen, and I guess everyone technically is. Like, if you live on this planet, you are a global citizen. But for me, what global citizen has always meant is being surrounded by different cultures and communities and learning from them and growing from hearing those experiences of different people. And I feel like you've kind of been like raised in that, and then like you moved to the US and you continued to have that sort of experience. And like, I don't know, that's just always so interesting. Like, I know you, but I never really knew like the details of your story. So like this has been really, really fascinating. And I think you also mentioned a good point about international students and how, at least for us that have been born in the US, how privileged it is to have been born in the US when it comes to applying to colleges and like financial aid, because it's kind of like the majority of schools kind of already guarantee that for some sort of aid for US citizens. But like for international students or even undocumented students, that's not necessarily the case. Like you were pretty limited on what schools you could apply to because of you needing financial aid to be able to come here. And there's that assumption that like international students kind of like have it made in terms of like I mean, at Lehigh, like it kind of felt like not international students at large, but just like a lot of students could pay for full tuition. So like that was US citizens, also like some international students were pretty wealthy and to be
Yeah.
able to go to school at Lehigh. So to
Yeah.
hear like your story to be like, that wasn't the case. Like I needed money to go to school. Was definitely enlightening for me to hear too.
Yeah. And like, yeah, you did mention like, I just thought of the episode you did with Julius and the Building the Home episode. He also mentioned like there are only a few schools that accepted the DACA that would offer sort of like the DACA program, and in a few ways like I feel like my experience is kind of similar in terms of like I think I definitely had more options because I was just coming in as an international student. Like I wasn't expected to like um, it's a bit more nuanced than that, but I think um, I definitely sort of agreed with what he was saying that like it's definitely more geared, like they want the diversity. U.S. institutions kind of want the diversity, but at the same time, it comes with a cost, and like
Mm-hmm.
how much they're willing to pay that cost determines how much they can um, how what the percentage of students they can accept of a certain category.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting to see, and definitely everyone has different experiences of where they come from.
Yeah, definitely. And just to switch gears a little bit, you mentioned family as well. And I know, like, just from knowing you, like, your family means so much to you. And now, like, you have a new added family member with Dana, and
Yeah.
she's amazing. Shout out to her.
Yes.
I know that, like, family is a huge part of not just you, but of Filipino culture as well. Cause I know we have other friends that are also Filipino that matters a lot to them. So I want to know like how important is your family to you? Like what does family mean to you?
Oh, in the words of wow, if I'm gonna butcher this, is gonna be like on the internet. So I was gonna say, as quoted from Lilo and Stitch,
Yes.
Ohana means family. Family means no one gets left behind, and
Mm,
that's definitely the experience that I was very fortunate and blessed to have. So family is a huge part, as you said, like definitely in the Filipino culture and community, and just on detail in my life as well. Like, my family was my biggest support system. Before I got married, um, definitely taught me a lot of things I needed to know, just how to do life and function in life. Especially like when it came to like coming to the U.S. To study and eventually work. Like my siblings who were here before, like who came to the US before me, like just gave me this like endless advice, and warranted and unwarranted, of just like more warranted than unwarranted, because like I definitely did not know what I was doing for some things. So they just like, like, oh, like definitely look into this, like how much are you putting in your saving, like like you need to like start a savings account, like oh, like and even check up on like, oh, did you renew your passport on things, or like did you
Mm,
get your like documents like rechecked and stuff like that every time I would like come back home. Like that would be a necessity. So like they've like my family's always like had my back for my whole life. So and that's obviously, I'm very, yeah, again, very blessed and fortunate to have that. um yeah, like I mentioned, my siblings, like how they've loved and supported me throughout all the years I've been alive. But I've also been fortunate to have like cousins my age, um, that I'm best friends with to this very day. And they're all across the world in Malaysia. Shout out to Patrick and Armand. Um, those are the names. Um, yeah, those are kind of just um, the people in my life that I think about when it comes to family, just like um, the support systems that we built over the years in terms of, just checking up on each other, um, supporting each other through like, hardships, having text groups to share things, share joys, and, um, things that didn't turn out well. But yeah, I'm thankful. I'm very thankful and blessed to be part of like, supporting and close knit family, at least within my personal circle. I also think of family. I just think of like the ways, or just the times that there would always be gatherings, always after Sunday, on Sunday, after church, with people, with relatives, related by blood, and just random people who would show up at church, or maybe just, people like family friends that, I didn't even know of. They would just come over to our place for lunch. They would hang out, we'd eat, we'd take a nap in like the living room. Like it was nobody's business. And what's amazing is that these gatherings were never like planned. It was just always the way it was. That's just the way it was, and anyone could have walked into our home and it would have felt welcome, whether you were related by blood or not. You were still considered family, and so that was sort of the environment that my parents and my family created. That our home would be a place where you could feel like family. On there'd be it'd be expected that you'd show up on Sunday and you could just like get a full plate to eat, but like you could just show up during the week if you needed a place to stay. Like my family would want you to make anyone else also feel family as well.
It's funny that you mentioned Sundays as well, because my family did that growing up too. Like after church on Sundays, you go to my aunt's house and everyone would eat, like all of my cousins and stuff. Like you just go and eat, and sometimes there would be people that you didn't know. But family is everything, and so I always find it interesting. Like I know family within the Haitian context, but to hear how similar it is for different cultures and communities, especially like from countries of like people of color, of just like how central like the family unit is, like not just your immediate family, but like the community is your family as well. Like I have cousins that I grew up with, or family friends that I grew up with, that people would think were my cousins, but I was like, no, we're actually not related by blood, but like, sure. Like
that's literally my mom and like all her friends back in Dubai. Like something that we do in Filipino culture is like, we're like, if as a sign of respect, but also to build community, you would call people that are older than you like tito and tita, which means uncle and aunt. So, and if they were like a closer to your age, you call them kuya and ate, which means big brother and big sister. But what it basically meant is that when you address someone, if like you were in the same space and you're meeting for someone the first time, if they were okay with it, you would basically call them like, oh, this is my like Kuya Emmanuel, which is my brother's name. This is your Kuya M. This is your Ate Charmaine. But basically, you're like, even to non-relatives, they would be calling other people within the same space just by this sort of identifier. And by saying that, you're saying like, I see you as my fan. I see you as if I would see like my like a normal relative by blood. But like, only because it's kind of like an unspoken rule that you just call them that. And it's like, that's so crazy, and that's awesome. And I'm glad like other cultures do it, but like it's just like I never questioned it, and like I never knew where it came from, but I'm glad it's there.
Yeah, I think that's so beautiful too, because it's like you're telling people like, I will take care of you as if you are my family too. And I feel like in the US, we don't have that. Like it's very individualistic here, like every man for themselves. But like, that's why it's so important to travel and to go outside and like experience different cultures and communities, because it's so different. And like, yeah, just like the way that you're explaining it, like people you don't even know, but are older than you. So you give them that sense of respect, but also telling them that like, I will take care of you if you are my family. Like I see you as my family, even though we're not blood related.
I think something that's interesting too is like, because you were saying that it's important for as us to become better global citizens is to, understand and, appreciate like the shared cultures that we have. And so I'm thinking of just an example of where it kind of gets cloudy in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
So here's the context. My eldest sister married a white man. Um, and the first sort of the meetings with him, obviously it was kind of like a culture shock because one, like this is the first time was sort of like, oh, like, it's multi-layered because my sister was bringing home sort of like her first boyfriend in a
Mm-hmm.
sense. But two, he wasn't Filipino. He wasn't Asian. He was white. So it was
Mm-hmm.
like, oh wow, this is like gonna be weirder for him than it is gonna be for us because he's gonna be entering into this, a different cultural space, and like there's going to be things he has to learn, cultural like oddities to him, and just nuances that he would never have known just
Mm-hmm.
from dating my sister. um, but like one thing that this I guess this became more of a thing, like especially when they got engaged, was my mom would always tell like inform and just sort of tell the younger siblings, me and my two other siblings. She would say, "Oh, you have to call him Kuya Ben," and I'm like, "But he's white." In my mind, I'm like, "He's white." It's like, do you think he'd want that, or like, do you think like, does he even care? And like, no, it's like doesn't matter. Like, he's family, so like you have to treat him that way. And I was like, okay, well, whatever. And like to him, like he also told us that like, okay, well, I respect your mother's wishes. And like obviously, it's good intent, but like for me personally, like him saying this,
Mm-hmm.
like for me personally, you don't have to call me that. But if you feel like, just know that you don't have to. But yeah, again, I understand where your mother's coming from. And I think it's important to like, you know, um, to have this community be built. But like at the same time, it's like, you don't have to do that for me. So I thought that was kind of interesting just from his perspective um, that he said that. But I think, yeah, it just goes to, yeah, it's just another aspect of like um, sort of navigating like would it be weird if someone else from a different culture called you something from their culture even though you didn't really get it, like
Mm-hmm.
especially in the context, yeah, especially in the context of like becoming part of that family.
Mm-hmm.
So like now that I married sort of into a white family on Dana's side, like they don't have those sort of terms. They don't have um yeah, sort of those other cultural things that I wouldn't have grown up with. Like those aren't applied to me. So I don't have the same experience as that, but I just noticed that that's sort of like it's there.
Mm-hmm. I guess it like would it be depending on like where you are too? So like if you are like going to your brother-in-law's or Dana's house versus if they were coming to the Dubai, but meeting with your family, you know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Like, would that also like I'm always interested in like that because for me, like a sense of if I'm entering someone else's home of a different culture, I would want to respect the cultural standing of their home, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But like if they're coming to my house, they don't have to do that.
Mm.
It's not required. Like they are able to, if they want to, they can. They have permission to, but it's like your brother-in-law was saying, like you don't have to call him.
Yeah, and I think it made sense because in the setting of, my family's home in Dubai, like my mom is there, so she wants to hear us say it.
Mm-hmm.
It was definitely more on my mom. Shout out to my mom.
Mm-hmm.
But like, in outside of that, um, and like especially in his home, it's always you don't have. He would like he even says now like, oh, you don't have to call me that. Like you're like that's the culture you grew up with, but I understand like these um not kind of the rules, but like you don't have to say it. Like
Mm-hmm.
don't feel burdened
Mm-hmm.
by a traditional. Don't feel burdened by this sort of tradition that you've grown up with. Not that it's a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that you don't like you are now in a different cultural space than you grew up with and you're sort of familiar with. So like, again, like don't feel burdened to be with that. And that's always just a weird thing because like you're so used, especially if you have grown up in one certain setting, you don't really know much else.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you operate outside of that context, you're kind of forced with like, okay, well, can I, like, should I still be doing the things that like how much does like my culture matter to me, or like how much do I want to, you know, uh, sort of live out these traditions if I'm in someone else's home, and
Yeah.
especially if their traditions kind of clash with yours.
Mm.
So that's sort of been like an interesting hypothetical that like I've been thinking about
Yeah,
sometimes.
that's really deep too, because it's like it's not as like black and white as like people make it seem. And like when I don't know, I understand. It's all about like cultural, it's a part of having that cultural awareness as well. Like you have to be aware of where you are, who you're with, and like trying to decide which side do I want to be today. Like
Right?
it can
Oh
be
my
really
gosh.
difficult. And I feel like that's the sense for like people that are like international, like in the US, student people that are first generation, like, oh, my parents are from somewhere else, and so in my house it was a different culture, but like when I go outside it's the US. And like things that you would do in the house you probably wouldn't do outside of the house. And I guess like now that you're married and like you have Dana and you're sort of like blend, you it's like a I don't know if you guys will ever want to have kids. That's a decision, but like that's something that you'll have to like navigate if that's something that is in the future for you
Yeah,
as well.
yeah, we've definitely talked at length about like, okay, yeah, what are definitely the cultural values that we want to instill in our kids? What are the things we want them to appreciate and learn?
Mm-hmm.
From her, um, she's Chinese adopted by white parents. For me, I'm a Filipino, an immigrant, I guess, in the sense of the U.S. To be an immigrant,
Mm-hmm.
in the process of being an immigrant, but grew up outside of the Philippines, so I'm kind of disconnected. So it's like, well, what can we teach them? And I guess we, both of us have duties as parents, just to do the best we can in order to, help them appreciate, the baby's gonna, well, unless we adopt, the baby's probably gonna be Asian. So we'd want to, let them have them experience like, here's the reason, like these are the reasons why we do the things that we do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, why people treat us a certain way. Um, for better, for worse, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And just like what are the contexts behind that. So yeah, um, deep thing to think about.
Yeah, of course. Have you been able to travel to the Philippines?
Not since 2019.
Okay, so that
Um,
wasn't that far.
yeah, thankfully
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, right before the pandemic. It's actually perfect
Right?
timing.
Oh yeah. Yeah, but
Okay, nice.
that was the last time I was in the Philippines.
Oh, nice. Okay. Switching gears again. Obviously, we've mentioned you being exactly skirt skirt. Um, you being really musically talented. You sing, you play a lot of instruments, you beatbox in our a cappella group, you produce, you arrange songs. I may be missing a couple things, but like you said, you like music theory. So like where did this start? Like
That's a
Houseway, like
yeah, it comes from a lot of places, but obviously, yeah. So family's one of them, but I'll start off by saying that music is huge, obviously, in the Philippines. Like if you look at, clips of on YouTube, who gets on Ellen DeGeneres and like other like Americans Got Talent, 90% of the time, those kids and those people that are featured on viral videos are Filipino. They're probably singing, "Leave the Door Open" by Silk Sonic or something like that. You've got the kid who's singing in the mall to like Sam Smith, "Too Good to Goodbyes," and I'm like, all right, this means that like music is like celebrated in the Philippines, and rightfully so. Like a huge part of our culture is karaoke. This came about
nice.
like very early on, and so like at every gathering I've been in, like there's always a karaoke machine. There's always the uncle out in the corner just singing "My Way."
It's a good
And everyone,
song. Good choice.
it's a great song. They're actually, well, it was so popular in the Philippines that it actually caused some violence, unfortunately.
Really?
Yeah, there were a couple of, I think it was like, they called it the My Way killings, unfortunately. So again, this is probably like on
Wow.
the darker side. So I don't want to dwell on this for too long.
No, I just thought people can Google it if they want to figure it out.
Yes, this could be one of the links that Dabney sends out in the description.
Imagine.
My Way killings, they really happened. But yeah, long story short, some guys sang My Way way too many times, and someone went out and basically took his life because it was annoying him. So,
oh my goodness.
But
okay.
Aside from that, music is big in the Philippines. Yeah, but I pretty much grew up also just, and I was blessed to be raised in a family of musicians from the time I was born. I have a lot of good memories of just me on long car rides with just an eclectic range of different soundtracks. You've got like classical stuff. You've got Broadway. You've got the top 100 worship songs of 2004 or something. So yeah, to me, it's like no surprise that my family grew up to love music because we were just so inundated with it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of like a gamble. It's kind of like a gamble when you're raising kids. I've heard from like different like parents, because like sometimes you'd want like your kid, if you're really pushing hard, to like a certain thing, and they just end up not liking it.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're just fortunate enough that like, I think my parents presented a lot of joy in making music and celebrating with music. So like when we were growing up, we kind of equated that same joy, like music, with that joy that's shared. So, you know, my parents did a really good job of, you know, presenting like a different range of music to listen to and just celebrating it. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of where that came from. As far as like musical instruments, I started off with the violin, and I had the choice of playing either the piano, violin, for a good 10 years. Mm-hmm. And I had the choice when I first started. I had the choice of playing either the piano or the violin. And my eldest sister already was playing piano. She was trained as a classical pianist. My brother did saxophone, and my other sister did flute. So, you know, I was kind of like the last one. And mom was like, okay, well, you get a choice of one of two things. You get one of two things. You get a piano or the violin. And I thought, well, my sister already does piano, so I don't want to feel like I'm gonna like take someone's space by like doing that. It's not, it doesn't make this family more special. I think that's like what I was like thinking to myself. So, you know, I'll play the violin. And I didn't really have much of a say about that. My mom was, you're playing the violin. Yeah, like again, I took started around when I was 8, and I took lessons for 10 years all the way through high school. So I did it for a good 10 years. So that's kind of like where my musical journey started from, as an independent, or sort of like a musician playing independently, and started with the violin. Mm-hmm. During that time, I also started to grow my own personal playlist and music selection. What music is going to define me? What music am I going to listen to? What makes me stand out? And because I had 3 other siblings, like I kind of already had a good, you know, playlist to choose from, because I was basically listening to what they were listening to for the most part. And more so because I inherited my brother's old Sony Walkman. Not the CD one. It was like a digital one. So like,
okay. I was like, you said Walkman, and I instantly thought of the cassette one.
We did have the cassette, and we had the CD one, but I think my brother eventually got like the digital one. It was basically like a better iPod, honestly. Mm-hmm. But it basically had all the songs I kind of started listening to by myself. And I was like, oh, this is great. So I have my own music to listen to, but it's my brother's music. One musician that stood out, or like one band that stood out to me during that time, was Daft Punk. Like it was the song Harder, Better, Faster, Stronger, and that might be the title of this podcast, of this episode. That would be really weird, but no.
Hey, that doesn't matter. So if it makes sense to you, that's all that matters.
I don't think it would make sense to the audience. But that got me into electronic dance music. I thought it was like really cool that, like, you know, these like guys from France were essentially taking older music and they were sampling it and they were like remixing it to make it sound fresh, something new. And I was like, oh man, this is great. I wanted to do that. So that really got me into like mixing music, like as if I were a DJ. So I did that for like, 2 years, and then I got tired of it and I was like, no, I want to go further. And so I started getting into producing electronic dance music. I got like, if you're familiar with the program, FL Studio, Fruity Loops. I don't know, what does your
Which
brother use for producing?
I have no
You
idea.
should know. He
I
should be talking about this. Oh my God.
I'll
Get him
ask
back here. Get Gio back on the podcast. I'm kidding.
I'll ask him for you. I'll be like, what he listens to.
Yeah, because if he raps and produces himself, like he should know. Anyways, but yeah, that got
I'm
me.
not in the studio. I just listen to the songs.
You just listen to the songs. let me just say, like, once you listen to the songs, you'll get a better affinity of like what life is like in the studio. It's fascinating. But yeah, I started to get an interest for producing electronic music because I wanted to be like the people I was listening to. Yeah, during that time, I also started exploring other instruments outside of the violin. That was and in question, these were like the keyboard, the bass guitar, and the acoustic guitar. This was born more out of a need for more musicians at the church my family was going to. So like I was already playing violin on the side, not on the stage on the church, but I was kind of on the side, so it was a little extra. But I think there was just more of a need for like, okay, well, I think we're running out of keys players, running out of bass players, and so I kind of just took it upon myself to like learn how to play. And it was something like I kind of wanted to do outside of playing violin because I was just doing it every day and I didn't like it that much. Yeah, my parents wouldn't like that. But during that time, like since I started picking up these instruments, I also formed a band with my cousins. We called it the Square Root of Nine because there were three of us.
Nice.
It's a really creative name. And we started writing songs and like that were more like singer-songwriter, like R&B, very like pretty much chasing after the Justin Bieber fame, because I think we formed this band as soon as like Justin Bieber started getting famous. So like we were basically covering his songs and other like top 100 pop songs at that point. But yeah, during that kind of challenge, like picking up these instruments and like producing electronic music really challenged me to operate in a group setting where it wasn't just me like producing electronic music just for myself. Like I had to think about like, oh, like, how did the other band members sound? Like, what does it mean to like be a musician and operate in that space where it's not just me that's like calling the shots and doing my own thing? Like, how can I sound good to make the group sound good as a whole? Yeah, it's forced me to operate sort of in that environment, where I wasn't just thinking about myself musically, but also just like with other people performing. And then lastly, I got into college a cappella because my brother, before when he went to college, was part of the Bubs, the Tufts Beelzebubs.
Wow.
Yeah.
You're on like, oh my gosh, what was it called? Sing It On? That like discovered pentatonics.
Yes, pretty much. Yeah, they were the good group back then.
Yeah, that's a big deal.
Yeah, so like whenever my brother came home from college, he would just bring back CDs of like, or no, it was my eldest sister actually grew to love a cappella, and then started bringing like us the CDs when she came back home. And then my brother happened to get into collegiate a cappella through Bubs, and then skip over my sister because she didn't do it, and then I end up doing it because Nat Jenkins, the man, the myth, the legend, if anyone knows him, told me I should do it, and I was like, okay, I'll give it a shot. And so I auditioned. They really liked my beatboxing, I guess. It wasn't that great. But yeah, I started doing that, grew to be better at it, and eventually started taking like my producing skills and told our group off the record like, hey, I'm willing to do this and I think I can do this, so let's make an album. And so I produced the debut album. I've done 2 singles with them. I did a little EP with another a cappella group, and now I've just finished the latest album for Off the Record, which is coming out soon.
Yes, I'm so excited.
Yeah. Super interesting that it was recorded during a pandemic because
Yeah.
like everyone has a different mic quality, everyone has a different like room setting. But yeah, that was a challenging experience. But yeah, all those experiences have been just sort of little milestones in like my growth in appreciating and music. And like I've met a lot of interesting people just from like, doing like producing and just working with, and just there's a lot of joy in it too. And it's a bit inexplicable, but it's something that I'm glad to have experience now.
I agree. As someone who is also in the group as well.
Yar.
And you did my senior song, which everyone loved and loved to perform. So like that's a testament to your talent.
Thank you. This is a little tidbit to the audience. I actually asked Dabney if she wanted to record her senior solo before she left, because you graduated early, correct?
Yeah, I did.
And I was like, yeah, you know what? This would be a fun thing. So she came over to my place, we recorded it, and nothing came out of it. So
hey, that was all you.
No, nothing came out of it because like I didn't finish.
Do you still have that file?
I still have the file. So
maybe that's something we could do in the future. I could re-record because
if you want to.
I don't know how my voice was.
It wasn't the best take.
No, it wasn't.
Something that I've learned from like recording people, and this is a bit of a tangent, I guess, so I apologize.
No, you're
but
good.
something that I've learned recently through also another thing about music is that it's so especially with today's current technology. There's so much you can learn thanks to like YouTube and TikTok and Instagram. Like those channels are so good at like teaching people different things that I wouldn't have learned otherwise. So like something that I learned recently was that like whenever you're like recording anything, could be a podcast or more so in like in the context of music, is that you want to record with just the intention. Like if you get something wrong, like whether it's like a note or like the length of the note or just like the pitch, that can be corrected easily. What's missing is that if you don't have like, if you're not going for the feeling of the song that you're going for, then you're really losing out. It's not a great take if that's the case.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was tangent.
Music
about that.
tip for all those.
Music tip for all the producers out there. But even you can extend that outside of music. Like,
yeah,
I think like intentions definitely do go a long way.
They do.
Yeah.
Live with intentionality, people. That's all you gotta do.
Yeah, and give yourself enough grace to make up for mistakes as well.
Yeah, be nice to yourself.
Yeah. This is what we're learning.
This is all what we're learning. As we left college, we're like, I should be nicer to myself.
I really should.
And y'all should too. Y'all listening, be nice to yourself. Again, I like to say switching gears, but it really is. Moving forward. This past year with COVID, there's been, at least for the Asian community in the US, there's been a lot, an increase in hate crimes towards Asians in the US. And it's led to, at least for me specifically, more awareness about the racism and prejudice towards Asians. Obviously, as a Black woman myself, like I knew that if you aren't white in this country, you probably face a lot of racism, prejudice. But I think this year really like opened everyone's eyes to like how deep it went, at least in this country. And it also reminded us of how like dangerous terms like the model minority is, because like it's an erasing process, right? You saying like the term like, oh, they're the model minority erases their struggles and their experiences by trying to like fit them into whatever is, I'm not good at this word, palatable. I think whatever is palatable to white supremacy and what sort of those standards are. So I would love to know, like, especially from the context of someone that wasn't raised in this country, but you were still living in this country as an Asian person, like, what are your, I guess, thoughts on all of this?
Yeah, that's a really like deep and heavy question. And I was thinking about this earlier because I think one of the terms that, um, the research that I was doing even before this and just the articles I was reading, it always touched upon like Asian Americans. And
Mm,
as someone who is Asian that and lives in America, there are certain things that I'm not entitled to as an Asian American and that definition of it.
mm-hmm,
So, sort of like what the Census Bureau defines as an Asian American or a Asian American Pacific Islander is that you are an American that that is ethnically Asian or identifies as such and or identifies as such. But the context is there is that you are American, I guess, by birthright or by basically naturalization. And I have an interesting sort of take on it because I'm not American. I'm an Asian living in America, but I still, based on the color and the look of my skin, um, can experience, the sort of racism that and the violence that we are that we're witnessing, during this pandemic, unfortunately. So I think we were talking about before was sort of an interesting point is that I was talking about like when I was growing up, my siblings always said I had sort of a mix of accents from the time I was like 12 to 14 years old, and eventually that sort of dropped, and I don't know why, and I sort of developed like this accent that I have now, which I don't even know if you would call it an accent. And that's sort of like, again, that's a term that would be comparing to a standard of like,
mm-hmm,
Western standards of like, this is the, what a normal accent would be like. Anything else is an ethnic sort of thing.
mm-hmm,
So I it was always, when I was growing up, it was always like, you know, oh, you sound smart, or like you sound like, oh, you sound like very American. And that was always, and to like Filipinos and like for people back home, that was always equated with like you having a lack of a Filipino accent meant you were like, educated in the US, that you were like had a higher standard of education, which is true in that sense. But there are bad associations with, or like there are not so great association, the consequences of associating those two together. Um, that you were talking about, like with you know, and it kind of goes in the mold of like the model minority myth of
mm-hmm,
saying like, oh, like this Asian person, like, they're like an upright standing citizen, but like, you sort of erase like, um, sort of like the cultural like things they grew up with that would be like, part, even though they don't show it, that's sort of like the culture that they still came from and still is like a still valuable part of them that isn't in Western culture.
mm-hmm,
So I was kind of told like growing up that like, oh, you don't have an accent. It sounds good. That means you'll be able to, blend in well with like, with, the Americans or like, it'll make college life easier for you. And that is true. Unfortunately so. I've, I think I've definitely had an advantage in terms of making friends and probably getting opportunities because I didn't sound like I was from outside the U.S. Um, and every time I was sort of that I gave people like, and I told people that I was, an international student, they're like, oh, you don't really sound international. Like, are you saying that because like you're a global citizen? You're just like, a U.S. citizen. You just grew up somewhere else. I'm like, no, I'm from the Philippines and I didn't grow up in the U.S. and I'm not a citizen of this place. So, um, it's always, it was always been, and like that still happens now and like, and into the workplace. And I'm not surprised that it does because people expect me to like, because of the way that I sound and the way that I, present myself and I talk, that that's something that like fits the mold of like, oh, like you um, fit this Western standard that is equated with, like um, white normalcy.
mm,
And um, yeah, that's something that I thought, you know, would like protect I thought, for the longest times, like I was very, fortunate to be, sort of protected by this shield of like, um, oh, like this is what people think of me. And if I continue to like live my life the same way, I'm not risking anything.
mm-hmm,
Um, but I think, like you were saying, in this and during the pandemic, that even that is still not like just that fragile shield of the model minority doesn't protect Asians and Asian Americans from, just saying like, oh, the China virus, like
Yeah.
you guys caused this. And even like there have been times where I've been like told to my face that like, oh, like the Chinese did this, as if like, I'm supposed to be the problem, or like I was the issue with all this. And I was like, oh, I was like, why are you telling me this in the first place? Um, but yeah, that doesn't disallow people from saying that, and associating like this terrible virus with people who have a certain look.
Hmm.
So like, it just goes to show that like the model like the terms like in the model minority give, like as you were saying, like, this false sense of like upstanding compared to other minorities in the US, that quickly crumbles when something doesn't go right with the American society and with Western society, such as a pandemic that affects
Hmm.
everyone.
Yeah.
Disproportionately so with other people, with certain races. But like it's just a sad it's just a sad like upstanding that like, unfortunately, like, I myself like have been able to not take advantage of, but like have been fortunate to have opportunities with, but like haven't, um yeah, but still is experienced by many Asian Americans to this day,
Hmm.
um for
Yeah.
worse.
First of all, I wanted to say thank you for sharing all of that. It's not easy. Um,
Yeah, sorry, it was very discombobulating for me to say, but yeah, thank you
that's
for listening.
okay. Yeah, of course. That's what I'm here for. And it's so important to share stories like yours, especially with someone that's had the experience like yours, to be like, basically, you can't judge people. I mean, it's the cheesy, like, can't judge a book by its cover, but it's like so true at the same time. Like, there's so much more to a person than what meets the eye. And then another point to that, again, like when you're talking about like white normalcy and like that model minority myth, I think white supremacy does a good job of making people believe that they are close to whiteness, and in that way you are accepted by whiteness. And like you were saying, up until a certain point though, because it can easily switch, and they can turn the whiteness, that concept of like white supremacy can easily switch and turn against you.
Mm,
um and so those people that I say like that lean into their internalized racism is essentially like that, think like, oh, because I'm doing well, that means like all people that look like me are doing well. Like, oh, can we stop talking about race and stuff because like I'm doing well? And it's just like, yeah, but the minute whiteness or white supremacy doesn't like you,
it will cut you
it
off.
will cut you.
It
It
will
will
cut
just
you.
cut you. Like
Yeah.
literally. So I think what you said was just really important when we're looking at, again, another point that you made, like not just Asian Americans or AAPI people from the US, but Asian immigrants as well that are also experiencing what it's like to be Asian in this country. Like
Mm,
the US doesn't really care. Like no one looks at you and then like they just think because you're not white, you're not from here.
yeah.
And so like there's the implications that come with that, the actions towards you that come with that, unfortunately. um so yeah, I think that's just really interesting, all the things that you said, and it's really important for all of us to think about.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah, anytime. And just to close off the seriousness, because I like to end it on a lighter note, I guess, what makes you proud to be Filipino and Asian?
Fun question. There's a something that I've always found really funny, is that one of the tourist taglines for the Philippines when you arrive in the Manila International Airport is, you'll see plenty of signs saying it's more fun in the Philippines. And It's true. Like, not just from like a location standpoint. Like, the Philippines is great if you haven't gone. The people there are amazing. Food is great. Culture is great. Please go there. Don't
I
try
want
to.
to. I'm
Yeah.
not everyone else too, but I'm trying to go.
It's great. But it's definitely the people that make it fun. And
Mhm.
so like every experience that, like when we've talked about, like, it's from whether it's the hospitality to just, the music and the karaoke, it's just being a Filipino. um, Something that I'm proud of when it comes to Filipino is just like the fact that um, I can it's fun when we're all together. It's fun to have to make people feel like family. It's it's a good thing that we are hospitable by nature, and that's something I'm really proud of a culture that that I've experienced growing up, that I've seen my parents do so like effortlessly, and that's something that I want to continue um, with my own family, and within as I become a U.S. citizen eventually, who knows, as I share like with the people that I live with. Um, yeah, that's something that I'm proud of. That our culture just represents as a whole, and like I'm yeah happy to be a part of that. And I think and then I think since you divided this into Filipino and Asian, I'm just gonna take it apart. Um, Sort of, I don't know, but like with that, there's a whole you know it's just from any if no matter where you are from around the world, like you definitely take like all the cultures that um your you grew up with from your nationality. But I think like Asia as a whole is just super unique, is because you have these clusters of countries that kind of started out like as um we were the ones that were like colonized. We were the ones that were taken advantage of. And that isn't a great thing, obviously. But from a historical standpoint, and even now, but like there are shared experiences that we have that were born out of that. And when I think of like other Southeast Asian countries, like when I first came here to Philly, I saw a lot, like there were a lot of deli stores that are around me that were, operated by Indonesian families. And the first thing, like when I walked in the store and I came here, they're like, "Are you Indonesian?" I'm like, "No, but thank you for thinking that I was." But like now I want to know more about like, it was, I guess because like we Indonesians and Filipinos look very much like each other, just from like a facial standpoint and like the features. But like when you start to hear like the differences in the language, like it's there. But like the fact that they would like ask me, it's like, "Oh, are you Indonesian?" And like they wanted to like build a community from there. And I was like, "No, but like thank you for thinking that I was, I guess." I wanted to like make them still think, like have them still believe that like I could still be their friend, and like a good customer, just because I thought I looked Indonesian, but like had that shared um sort of experience of just being in the same area. um but yeah, that's I'm just and like for like all Asians, and this is something that that I'm seeing like a lot of online, and a lot of like Facebook groups. Something that is a thing is called subtle Asian traits. I don't know if you've heard of that.
No.
Oh well, it's very huge in the Asian community. It started on Facebook, and then there's also like other offshoots called like subtle Asian dating, which is problematic in its own way. But subtle Asian traits, this one Facebook page that I didn't really know existed until a few years ago, like does such a great job of celebrating just different like achievements that like Asians and Asian Americans and API folks like achieve, what they achieve like in like all over the world. Whether it's like from like you got Simu Liu, and like playing like a Marvel hero coming up in like Shang-Chi, and like he's on that and he's like, "Yo, this is like it wouldn't be popular without you guys." And like whenever like someone goes like gets like is on America's Got Talent, and it's always like this Asian person, everyone's just like, "Yo, check this guy out, like this guy's amazing." Like it's our achievements, whether you're Filipino or Indonesian or Korean or Indian, or anywhere within that area, like you're like we've kind of like all grouped together and like have started this discourse of just like celebrating achievements and um, just being proud of that even though we may be in a place that sometimes discourages us from like acting out on our Asianness or like sharing those traditional values, like um to see that like us celebrating it just gives me so much joy.
Mm-hmm.
Even though it's online, but like I know that even if I'm out and about, I know people in people's hearts that they're celebrating Asians all the same.
Yeah.
So yeah, we just love hyping each other up, I guess.
I
Like
love that.
yeah. So
That's great.
that's my answer to that question, I guess.
Thanks for sharing. And
Yeah.
that basically concludes the serious part. And we're going to close out with a bit of a speed round. So basically, I only have 5 questions. Don't think too hard about it. Don't think too hard about it, is what I'm saying. And just whatever comes to mind. And that's
Shoot.
it. That's it. Are you ready?
I am ready as I could ever be, I guess.
Okay, these are all like favorites. Like favorite what?
Ooh,
Favorite.
ooh, okay.
Yes. All right. So first one, because you mentioned Marvel. Favorite Marvel character?
Oh wow, that's really
Mm-hmm.
oh wow. I don't have a favorite Marvel character. They're all good in their own right. But one movie that comes to mind a lot to me,
Mm-hmm.
and this is Doctor Strange, because I love the scene where, I mean, Endgame was great. Don't get me wrong. But the one scene where he reappears to Dormammu and says, "I've come to bargain," just reminded me a lot of, I'm Christian, so I'm gonna share the gospel right now. Reminds me a lot of what Jesus Christ did for us in terms of in his death, he sort of like says, "I've come to bargain for the sins of everyone in the world." And so and the scene of him coming back to do that over and over again until Dormammu concedes, like hit me in a spot where I was like crying in the theater, where I was like, yo, like this guy like loves humanity or like wants to save humanity so badly he's willing to like obviously go through a time loop of just getting himself beat up until he wins.
Mm-hmm.
So like that was, I think he solidified like that kind of solidified Doctor Strange's like my favorite movie, but not so much a character. I don't know who my favorite character is.
Okay. Well, that's something you could think about in the future.
Oh gosh, I'm sorry, I didn't even ask the question.
Nah, that's fine. I'm just gonna. That's your favorite movie. That's good. Favorite artist right now?
Ooh, favorite artist right now is probably. Oh gosh, wow! I can't believe you did these speed rounds. This is actually really. Okay, well, I love Jacob Collier. He's my favorite artist of all time.
I need to listen to him. I haven't listened to him, but from like little clips I've heard, I was like, I think I would like this.
Yeah, he's just a bundle of joy, and like it's weird though, because like he's just this man of like he's just like this man of epic proportions, but like at the same time, but he's just so humble when he performs. So like I think I just really like that about him, and a lot of people do as well. So yeah, definitely do check him out.
Will do. Favorite Filipino dish?
Lumpia. So that lumpia is. Do you know what lumpia is?
I don't think you've made. I've never tried it.
I don't think you've ever made it for me. Yeah.
I just remember when was it you and Hannah that made someone made adobo chicken. That's
I did.
You did. Okay, that's all I've had.
Yes. Was that like the summer of like 20? Like during summer. I made adobo. Yeah, that's like probably my second favorite. First favorite is a lumpia, which is a fried spring roll, and it can have. It's not like an egg roll, like a traditional egg roll that you would get from like an American Chinese restaurant, because those are like thick.
Mm-hmm.
These are like thin wrapped but deep fried, and in them you can put like pork, vegetable, shrimp. I've seen people put cheese in it, but it's like pretty much it's just fried food and it's good. So it's always a hit at every party. No Filipino party will ever have leftover lumpia, because if they did, they'd probably give it away.
It's like someone, it's like if there's ever leftover like mac and cheese, it's like, oh, it probably wasn't good.
Oh
But
yeah,
whoever
yeah,
made
yeah.
it is just
Exactly.
like, if no one ate the mac and cheese, if there's leftover mac and cheese, probably wasn't that good. Or
Exactly.
like people, you haven't, it was so good that people are taking like to go plates.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what happens at Filipino like parties anyway. Like the host will always get out the Tupperware and be like, "Take some home."
Best
So
part.
yeah, best part.
Nice. Favorite Philly spot?
Ooh, that's a good question. Probably I love the area I live right now, Old
Mm-hmm.
City. That's where Dana and I currently live. One spot that holds dear to my heart, and this might sound touristy, is the museum area because
Mm.
that's where on little like on the hill that's like right next to the museum, but isn't like the main like wedding event center. We got married at this little pavilion. It's
Mm-hmm.
called the Mercury Pavilion, and it overlooks the Fairmount Waterworks on the by the Schuylkill. The Schuylkill's gross. I've always wanted to swim in it for some reason, but like it's this nice like dam slash waterfall that you can see in a like overlook 76, and it's like you get to see the park and everything. So that's kind of where we got married. And
Aw.
a lot of times I'll bike by there and just sit and by the area and think back, oh, that's where we got married.
Aw,
And,
that's so sweet.
I'll keep biking.
It's funny you mentioned being married because that's my last question for you is favorite thing about being married?
Oh, yay. Oh, wow. Ooh, I moved my mic in excitement. So sorry for the folks at home who had to hear that. Um, Favorite part about being married is having a companion. Just, 24/7 sounds like a lot, but once you're married, you'll eventually get used to it. And I'm only saying this after 5 months, I guess. But the fact that like I get to live, when you're dating, I don't mean to make this long. When you're dating, you're putting like your best impression to someone, to the person you're dating, in
Mhm.
hopes that they'll stay, in hopes
Mm.
that you'll still receive the same love that you currently do. Once you make the commitment to get married and you get married, that you don't have to put that impression anymore. And you've committed to stay with this person like no matter what. And obviously, you're working towards the best versions of yourselves. And I'm so thankful, about these past 5 months that like Dana and I like have had each other to help us be better versions of ourselves.
Mhm.
Um, and it's been just really fun. And I've learned a lot in the past like 2 months of just like things that I wasn't aware of about myself. And like how I operated to a fault, and how she gives me so much grace to like be better than that. Um, so yeah, just the in general, like yeah, the growth, the companionship. Yeah, those are like my favorite things about marriage so far.
Nice. That's such a lovely way to end this too. Dana's awesome. I can't say that enough.
Yeah,
She's amazing. You're amazing too, but Dana's
she's
awesome.
better. She I should she'll show if she was here if she were here. She's currently downstairs, but she'll
Mhm.
probably just like poke out from her head and just like shake her head and be like whatever. But yeah, thank you, Dabney, for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on, Keith. This has been really great. I learned so much about you
Thank
and
you.
like that I didn't know before. Like I knew the basics, but I didn't know like how deep it went. So I appreciate you coming here and I'm so excited for everyone else to hear your story.
Oh, well, appreciate that. Yeah, thank you so much, and best of luck with everything.
I hope y'all enjoyed this episode with Keith. I know I really learned so much from him, and getting to hear his full story from himself has really just made me appreciate him as my friend and his experiences and more. I learned so much about Filipino culture and how that compares to how I was raised in my own culture. And I just really loved that conversation. And for this week's Dabney Debrief, I really want to get into global citizenship and what that means. I feel like it means so many different things to so many different people. And that's the question that I have for y'all. Like, what does global citizenship mean to you? What's your definition of global citizenship? And how do you apply that to your daily life? What are you listening to? What are you watching? What are you reading? I mean, it kind of ties back into this cultural consciousness conversation that we've had. And yeah, I just want to dig deeper into that. So, like, what does global citizenship mean to you, and how do you apply that to your daily life? And yeah, that's pretty much it, y'all. So, thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you next week. Thank you for listening to today's episode. For links and resources, check out the episode notes. If you liked what you heard, help your girl out by leaving a 5-star rating and a review. For more content and updates, follow the show's Insta at the Uplift_podcast. And spread the word by telling your friends and sharing on social media. Subscribe to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're listening right now. For any questions or business inquiries, you can email me at theupliftpodcast1@gmail.com. This was The Uplift with Dabney Brice. See you next time.